There's something sacred about land you've built with your own hands. Every fence post, every tire rut, every nail in the barn, it's a piece of who you are. That's what my ranch was to me. A heartbeat carved into the mountains. A quiet place to start over after losing everything that once made life worth living. But peace never lasts long when there's an HOA involved. It started on a Monday morning that smelled like pine and dust. The kind of crisp air that reminds you you're alive. I was halfway through fixing a section of barbed wire on the west side of the property when I noticed something off. A string of pink survey flags fluttering along the fence line. They weren't mine. At first, I thought the county had sent someone out for a land study, but the stakes kept going, running clear past my property markers and deep into my pasture. My land. The flags cut across the field like a wound. I wiped the sweat from my brow and followed the line downhill until I spotted a shiny white SUV parked near the old cattle gate. A woman in sunglasses stood there, clipboard in hand, pointing at my pasture like she owned it. "Can I help you?" I called out. She turned, smiled in that tight, fake way people do when they're about to say something you'll hate. "Oh, hello. You must be Mr. Walker. I'm Samantha. I'm the new HOA president for the Ridgeview community." I frowned. "Ridgeview? That's 2 miles south. This here's my ranch. Yes, about that." She gestured to the stakes. "We're extending our community walking trail. It's going to be beautiful, connects to the lake, runs along this open stretch of pasture. The previous board already approved it." I felt my stomach tighten. "Approved it? This is private property. You can't just decide to build through it." She tilted her head, all sweet condescension. "The surveyor's documents show this section as unused easement land. It's technically part of the Ridgeview perimeter. So yes, we can." I took a long breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lady, that's not an easement. That's my grazing field. And if you so much as put one post in this soil, you'll be trespassing." Her smile didn't move. "I'm sure we can resolve this peacefully. The community will benefit and your property value could go up." I almost laughed. "My property doesn't need your kind of help." With that, I turned and walked away, but not before noticing a small emblem on her clipboard. The Ridgeview HOA logo stamped next to something new, Ridgeview Recreation Expansion Initiative. It wasn't just a trail. They were planning something big. That night, I pulled out every property document I owned. Deed, survey maps, boundary lines, all of it. My ranch had been in my family since my grandfather bought it after the war. The lines hadn't changed once, but when I compared the original survey to the new digital map from the county, something didn't add up. The HOA's perimeter line had shifted, by about 60 yards, right into my land. I stayed up until midnight making calls. The county office confirmed what I feared. The HOA had filed a community boundary adjustment just last month. No notice, no public hearing, no signature from me. They'd literally redrawn my property line on paper. The next morning, I drove down to Ridgeview's community center. It looked more like a country club than an office. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, fancy cars out front. I walked straight into the lobby, boots still dusty from the pasture. The receptionist blinked at me like I was a ghost. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see your president. Do you have an appointment?" "I do now," I said flatly. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, Samantha appeared from behind a frosted glass door, smiling that same practiced smile. "Mr. Walker," she said, "you didn't need to come all this way." "I did," I said, holding up a folder. "You altered county property lines. I didn't sign off on it, and you know it." Her smile faltered. "We followed the community's development plan. If you have concerns, you can attend the next board meeting." "Not good enough," I said. "Undo the adjustment now." She crossed her arms, voice turning icy. "Mr. Walker, the Ridgeview HOA operates within legal bounds. If you believe otherwise, consult your attorney." That was it. The tone, the arrogance, the dismissal. The same kind of tone I'd heard from city suits when they foreclosed on my old business after my wife died. Cold, bureaucratic cruelty pretending to be polite. I leaned in just enough for her to see the steel in my eyes. "You made a mistake messing with my land. Fix it, before I do." And I walked out. For the next week, I kept an eye on the property. Every day there was more activity. Survey crews, trucks, even a bulldozer. They were clearing a strip of my pasture like they already owned it. One morning, I found tire tracks cutting through my north field and 3 men installing posts along the edge. I stopped my truck, stepped out, and called over. "Who gave you permission to dig here?" One of them, a young guy in a neon vest, looked up nervously. "We were told this section was approved by the HOA, said it's part of a new walking path." "Well, they told you wrong," I said. "Pack it up and get off my land." The foreman looked hesitant but didn't argue. They left, muttering under their breath, probably thinking I was some cranky old rancher. But that night, I knew this wasn't over. The HOA wouldn't stop. People like Samantha never did, not when they thought they were untouchable. So I decided to do something they didn't expect. I was done playing defense. If they wanted a boundary, I'd give them one they'd never forget. That weekend, I hitched up my trailer and drove into town. Bought enough lumber, steel posts, and razor wire to make Fort Knox look like a garden fence. The guy at the hardware store raised an eyebrow. "Big project?" "Something like that," I said. By Sunday morning, I had the post driver out and my plans laid across the truck bed. If Ridgeview wanted a line between my land and theirs, I'd make sure it was clear, bold, unbreakable, and loud enough for the whole town to see. The only problem? I had no idea how far they were willing to go to stop me. By dawn the next morning, the hum of my post driver echoed through the valley. Each strike was sharp, deliberate, and personal, like hammering out every ounce of frustration the HOA had built up inside me. The ground was rocky, the work brutal, but the sound of metal hitting dirt was pure satisfaction. I wasn't just building a fence. I was reclaiming my line, the line they'd crossed the moment they decided my land was theirs to improve. The first section went up quick. Tall steel posts spaced 6 feet apart. 3 lines of barbed wire running tight and clean. But this wasn't the kind of fence you'd see around cattle. No, I was making something bigger, something symbolic. By noon, I had a 20-foot stretch done, and it already looked more like a wall of defiance than a property barrier. I set my old radio on the fence post, cranked up some Johnny Cash, and worked until the sun started dropping behind the hills. I didn't notice the black SUV until it pulled up to the gate. The engine cut off, and out stepped Samantha, Ridgeview's queen herself, clipboard in hand, high heels sinking in the dirt. She didn't even wait for me to stop working. "Mr. Walker," she called, waving one manicured hand like she was summoning a waiter. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I wiped the sweat off my brow. "Building a fence. You can't build that here. You're altering the community landscape without approval." I stared at her for a moment, trying to decide if she was serious. "Community landscape?" I said. "This is my ranch. There's no community here?" She gave that fake laugh again. "You're within the Ridgeview scenic boundary, Mr. Walker. There are regulations for consistent design aesthetics." That one got me to laugh, a real deep one that came straight from the gut. "Design aesthetics?" "Lady, I'm not putting up a white picket fence. This is ranch land, not a country club." Her smile tightened. "You're in violation of HOA Code 12B regarding perimeter obstruction height and visibility. Remove it by Friday or we'll have it removed for you." I leaned against the post, arms crossed. "You try to take down one post and I'll have the sheriff out here before you hit the end of the driveway." Her eyes flashed. "You can't threaten me." "It's not a threat," I said quietly. "It's a promise." She spun on her heel and stomped back to her SUV, kicking up dust as she went. I watched her drive off, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. She didn't realize it yet, but she'd just given me more motivation than I'd had in years. By the end of the week, the fence stretched across the full length of the disputed land, steel, wire, and grit from one end to the other. I'd even added a handmade sign to the gate. "Private property. Trespassers will be fed to the cows." Was it petty? Maybe, but sometimes petty sends the right message. 2 days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Thick envelope, HOA seal, formal notice of non-compliance. I opened it right there on the porch, half amused already. "Mr. Walker, the unauthorized barrier on the southern edge of your property violates Ridgeview Community Regulation 12B. You are hereby instructed to remove said structure. within 72 hours or face legal and financial penalties. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and tossed it into my wood stove. The flames took care of the rest. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, looking out through the window toward the pasture. The fence line glowed faintly under the moonlight, straight and proud. I thought about my wife, how she used to say that the problem with people like the HOA wasn't greed or pride, it was control. They couldn't stand the idea of someone living free. "Guess you were right again, Sarah," I whispered. But they picked the wrong man this time. The next morning, things escalated. I woke up to the sound of engines. When I stepped onto the porch, there were 3 county trucks parked by the gate. A group of men in reflective vests stood near the fence, talking to a woman in a navy skirt suit. Samantha, of course. I walked down the drive, calm and steady. "What's the problem this time?" I asked. Samantha turned with that same smirk. "Mr. Walker, these gentlemen are here on behalf of the County Development Board. They're verifying the location of your new structure." "Structure? You mean the fence?" "Yes," she said sweetly. "You've placed it on disputed land that falls within our jurisdiction." One of the county men stepped forward. "We're going to have to take some measurements, sir. There's been a boundary adjustment filed." I could feel the anger rising, but I kept my tone low. "You can measure all you want. Just don't touch my posts." They worked for about an hour while I stood by, watching. When they finished, the lead surveyor came over and quietly said, "He's right. The original property line puts the fence on his side." Samantha's face turned red. "That can't be accurate." "It's accurate," he said flatly. "The HOA's boundary claim doesn't hold up on record," she stammered, looking for a comeback, but nothing came. The county men packed up and left, leaving her standing there with her clipboard shaking in her hand. "Looks like your paperwork's got some holes in it," I said. Her voice trembled with fury. "You haven't heard the last of this," I smiled. "I'm counting on it." That evening, I noticed something strange. Someone had cut one of the barbed wires near the back field. Clean cut, sharp tool, not an animal. I repaired it, but the message was clear. Someone had been testing me. By the next morning, 2 more wires were down. That's when I installed trail cameras along the fence. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure every move was recorded. Sure enough, the next night, the camera caught her, Samantha, in her shiny SUV, headlights off, sneaking along the fence with a pair of wire cutters in hand. I stared at the footage, jaw tight. The arrogance, the nerve. This woman thought she was untouchable, but she'd just handed me the evidence I needed. The next morning, I printed the photos and drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Daniels had known my family for years. He looked at the photos, then leaned back in his chair. "Well, I'll be damned. That's the Ridgeview lady, ain't it?" "Yep," I said. "Caught red-handed on my property." He rubbed his chin. "You want me to press charges?" "Not yet," I said. "Let her dig her own hole a little deeper. Just keep this on record," he nodded. "I'll file it. But watch your back, Garrett. She's got connections." "I've got something stronger," I said. The truth. That night, as I stood by the fence watching the sunset burn red over the hills, I couldn't help but feel the calm before the next storm. The fence wasn't just metal and wire anymore. It was a line in the sand, one they couldn't cross without consequences. But something told me Samantha wasn't done, and neither was I. I thought the fence would end things. I'd drawn my line, proved my ownership, and caught Samantha trespassing on video. But people like her don't back down when they're wrong. They double down. 2 days after my visit to the sheriff's office, a thick envelope arrived by certified mail. It smelled like trouble before I even opened it. Inside were 9 pages of legal jargon titled "Cease and Desist Notice." According to the document, my unauthorized obstruction was a nuisance to the community and violated multiple Ridgeview codes. The HOA demanded the fence be removed within 10 days, or I'd face civil penalties and injunction. They'd turned a boundary dispute into a lawsuit. I leaned against the counter, scanning every paragraph while the coffee went cold beside me. The language was familiar, intimidation wrapped in official letterhead. It reminded me of the corporate contracts I used to fix as an electrician before moving out here. Same tone, same arrogance. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Evelyn Price, a sharp-tongued woman who'd handled my land paperwork when I bought the ranch. She answered on the second ring. "Let me guess, you just got a love letter from Ridgeview?" "Right on schedule," I said. "They're threatening to sue," she snorted. "Typical HOA move. I'll file a counter notice tomorrow. Don't tear the fence down, whatever they say. Wouldn't dream of it." "Good. They're bluffing, Garrett. But bluffs can still get messy. Keep documenting everything, every truck, every photo, every encounter. I'll make sure the county registrar sees the footage you gave the sheriff." The following week felt like living under surveillance. HOA vehicles started crawling past my gate like vultures, white SUVs with tinted windows pretending to be community patrol. Sometimes they'd stop and take photos of my property. Other times they'd park for 10 minutes, engines idling, and drive off when I appeared. I didn't rise to the bait. I just waved. It drove them crazy. By Friday, Samantha had posted a public announcement on Ridgeview's community site. I saw the screenshots before she deleted them. Certain individuals are refusing to cooperate with community expansion efforts. Their behavior jeopardizes neighborhood unity and property values. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. The comments section turned into a circus. "He's always been difficult. We should vote to remove his access road. Why even let people like that buy land near us?" The same mob mentality that destroys small towns one rumor at a time. That weekend, I decided to attend their next HOA meeting. If they wanted a spectacle, I'd give them one. But on my terms. The Ridgeview clubhouse was packed when I arrived. Dozens of homeowners sat in folding chairs, murmuring like it was church gossip hour. At the front, Samantha sat behind a polished oak table, flanked by 2 board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. When I walked in, the room quieted. Every eye followed me as I took a seat near the back, arms crossed. Samantha cleared her throat. "Before we begin tonight's agenda, I'd like to address ongoing conflicts affecting our community's image. Here we go." She lifted a folder dramatically. "As many of you know, a local landowner, Mr. Walker, has erected an unsightly and unauthorized fence that violates our scenic zoning perimeter. The board has issued a formal order for its removal." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I stood. "You mean the fence that sits entirely on my deeded property line?" Samantha stiffened. "This isn't a Q&A, Mr. Walker." "Good," I said, stepping forward. "Because I didn't come here for questions. I came with answers." I dropped a folder of my own onto the table. Inside, property maps, county approvals, and photos of her cutting my wires at midnight. "This," I said, tapping the evidence, "is the real violation: trespassing, vandalism, fraudulent boundary filing, all done under your name." Gasps filled the room. Her composure cracked for half a second before she forced a smile. "This is absurd." "Those photos could be anyone. They're time-stamped, sheriff-verified, and already in the county's hands." Silence. One of the board members leaned toward her. "Samantha, is this true?" She shot him a death glare. "Of course not." "He's twisting facts to attack me." I turned to the crowd. "You've all known me for years. I keep to myself, pay my taxes, and mind my business. Ask yourselves who benefits from turning my ranch into a walking trail. Not you, not me. But her? She gets developer kickbacks for every acre added to Ridgeview's boundary. Check your HOA fees if you don't believe me." The murmuring returned, louder this time. Samantha slammed her gavel. "Meeting adjourned," she barked, voice cracking. Then she gathered her papers and stormed out, heels clicking like gunfire on the floor. I stood there for a moment, feeling every stare in the room shift, from suspicion to realization. The tide had turned. 2 days later, Evelyn called. "You rattled the hornet's nest," she said. "Nice work." "I wasn't trying to perform," I replied. "I just wanted the truth out." "Well, the truth's spreading fast. The county's opened a formal inquiry into Ridgeview's land filings. Samantha's lawyer's already backed out." "Good," I said. "Maybe she'll finally stay off my land." "Don't count on it," Evelyn warned. "Cornered people do stupid things." She was right. That night, headlights appeared outside my window again. Same black SUV, same pattern. But this time, it didn't stop at the gate. It pulled up the driveway. I stepped onto the porch with a flashlight in one hand and my phone recording in the other. Samantha got out, shaking, mascara streaked, fury burning in her eyes. "You ruined me!" she screamed. "Do you know what you've done? They're auditing every account, every dollar. My reputation gone!" I kept my voice calm. "You did that yourself. You think you've won?" She spat. "You're just a washed-up rancher living off pity. When I'm done, you'll wish you'd never crossed me." "Already been there," I said quietly. "Doesn't scare me anymore." She took a step closer. "You don't deserve that land. It belongs to this community." "Funny," I said. "Because the county record says otherwise." For a long second, she just stared at me. Breathing hard, trembling with rage, she couldn't aim anymore. Then she got back in her SUV and tore off down the gravel road, tires spitting dust into the night. I watched the taillights disappear, then looked out at the fence glinting under the moonlight. It stood tall and steady, just like I built it, proof that I wouldn't be pushed around anymore. But deep down, I knew this wasn't finished. She'd lost control, lost power, and soon she'd start grasping for something worse: revenge. I glanced toward the dark outline of Ridgeview in the distance and muttered, "Let's see how you handle losing what you tried to steal." Because I'd already decided what came next. If they wanted a war on paper, I'd give them one, with every county official, every news outlet, and every legal clause that could expose just how rotten Ridgeview really was. And I wasn't done building fences yet. The morning after Samantha's midnight visit, the world seemed too quiet, that eerie kind of calm when the air itself knows a storm is coming. I stood on the porch sipping my coffee, staring at the frost glinting along the fence line. The steel posts looked silver in the sunrise, sharp and unyielding. Every inch of it reminded me that I'd fought for this ground once before, and I wasn't about to lose it to someone with a clipboard and an inflated ego. My phone buzzed. It was Evelyn, my lawyer. "You might want to sit down," she said. "I'm already standing," I replied. "What now?" "The county investigator just wrapped up their preliminary audit. They found something big. Ridgeview's development fund has missing money. A lot of it," I frowned. "How much are we talking?" "North of 200 grand, she said. "Most of it routed through dummy contracts to something called Samantha Green Consulting." I couldn't help but laugh. "She didn't even try to hide it." "She got comfortable," Evelyn said. "She's been doing it for years, and nobody called her out until you built that fence. Now the county's freezing her HOA accounts." I took a slow breath. So this is it. The beginning of the end. Not quite. She's going to fight dirty, Garrett. Expect character attacks, threats, maybe even property damage. She's desperate. Then let her swing, I said. She'll just dig her hole deeper. By that afternoon, Ridgeview looked like a hornet's nest. Emails flew around, emergency board meetings popped up, and half the residents were whispering outside their garages. Samantha's iron grip had finally cracked, and people were starting to see her for what she really was, a petty dictator in pearls. I didn't have to wait long before she made her next move. At exactly 6 p.m., I heard engines rumbling up my road again. 2 white HOA trucks and 1 county vehicle stopped by the fence. I watched from the porch, arms folded. Out stepped Samantha, wearing oversized sunglasses even though the sun had long gone down. Behind her was a man in a cheap suit, probably the last lawyer still willing to take her calls. She walked up to the gate with her clipboard. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice tight, "I've come to inform you that Ridgeview will be exercising its legal rights to remove this unauthorized barrier." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my fence?" "Yes," she snapped. "This structure violates the revised boundary agreement." "Funny," I said, "because the county just declared that revision illegal." Her face went pale. "That's not confirmed. Want me to read you the email?" I asked. "It's from the same office that's investigating your consulting fund." The lawyer beside her coughed softly. "Ms. Green, perhaps we should—" "Quiet," she hissed, then glared at me. "You're a bully, Mr. Walker. You've manipulated the board, lied to officials, and turned this community against me." I let her rant, her words shaking the night air like brittle glass. When she finally stopped, I said quietly, "No, Samantha, you did that yourself." The silence that followed was thick. Even her lawyer looked embarrassed. She spun on her heel, climbed into the SUV, and sped off. The HOA trucks followed, tail lights fading into the trees. I watched until the road was empty, then turned back to the fence. It stood just as I built it, silent, sturdy, untouchable. 2 days later, the Ridgeview Gazette ran the story. HOA president under investigation for financial misconduct. Residents demand removal. They even used one of the photos from the HOA meeting. Samantha standing red-faced while I laid out the evidence. The story spread faster than wildfire. Within 24 hours, every coffee shop in town was buzzing. People stopped me at the feed store, the diner, even at church just to say, "Heard what you did." Good for you. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. Something Ridgeview had forgotten under Samantha's rule. But even as she fell from grace, I didn't celebrate. I'd learned long ago that desperate people are most dangerous when cornered. That danger came sooner than I expected. On Friday evening, I came home from town to find one of my pasture gates hanging off its hinges. The wood was splintered, the metal twisted. Someone had rammed it with a vehicle. I found tire tracks, SUV-sized, leading right up to the damage. I didn't need a detective to know who it was. I called the sheriff, and within an hour, a deputy came out to take photos. "Same Ridgeview lady?" he asked. "Who else?" I replied. He shook his head. "She's already on thin ice with the county. If she's behind this, it's over for her." "Good," I said. "I just want her off my land for good." The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Tracy, one of the Ridgeview board members, was calling. "Garrett, you're not going to believe this," she said, voice breathless. "Samantha just tried to call an emergency HOA vote to expel you from community boundaries entirely, said you were a threat to Ridgeview values." I chuckled. "Did it pass?" "Not even close." Half the board walked out. The rest voted to suspend her pending investigation. "About time," I said. "She's furious. She's been calling people nonstop, claiming you forged the documents." "She's spiraling," I said simply. "Let her." That night, I sat by the window watching lightning flicker in the distance. A storm was rolling down from the mountains, painting the sky in flashes of white and blue. The thunder hit hard, shaking the windows. It felt fitting, like nature itself was closing the chapter on her reign. The next morning, I drove by Ridgeview to grab supplies. Samantha's SUV wasn't parked in its usual spot at the clubhouse. Instead, a closed pending audit sign hung on the front door. Through the glass, I could see boxes stacked on the tables, files, binders, receipts. Everything she'd once used to control people now reduced to evidence. I should have felt satisfaction, maybe even pride. But mostly, I felt something quieter. Relief. She'd spent so long trying to take what wasn't hers. And in the end, she'd lost everything. That night, I got another call from Evelyn. "She's officially done," she said. "The board voted unanimously to remove her as president. The county's pressing charges. You won." I sat in silence for a moment, staring at the fence glinting in the moonlight outside my window. "No," I said finally. "I just got back what was already mine." The next day, I drove down to the county courthouse to sign the final paperwork reinstating my original property lines. The clerk handed me the stamped deed, my family's name etched in bold letters exactly where it belonged. It felt like breathing again after years underwater. As I stepped outside, I saw Samantha sitting on a bench near the parking lot. She looked smaller than I remembered. Makeup gone, posture slumped, phone in her hand, but no one left to call. For a brief moment, our eyes met. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. I just tipped my hat and walked away. The fight was finally over, but Ridgeview wasn't the same anymore. And that was a good thing. People had started questioning every rule, every fee, every ounce of authority the HOA had abused for years. The fear was gone, and for the first time in a long time, the valley felt like home again. Still, as I looked at that fence one last time before heading inside, I smiled to myself. It wasn't just wood and wire anymore, it was justice. Standing tall, unshakable, and mine. The news spread faster than prairie fire. By the following week, Ridgeview wasn't whispering anymore, it was erupting. Every conversation in town seemed to orbit one name: Samantha Green. You couldn't go to the grocery store, the post office, or the cafe without overhearing her story. People who once clung to her every word now rolled their eyes at the mention of her name. The paper trail Evelyn uncovered was damning. Samantha had used HOA funds for everything from landscaping her personal property to paying off her SUV lease. Worse, she'd signed off on community development payments that went straight into her private LLC, a company that didn't even exist on record until 6 months. AGO. The county called it fraudulent enrichment. I called it karma. When the official charges dropped, it was front-page news. HOA president arrested. Embezzlement, fraud, and property manipulation under investigation. There was a photo of her being escorted into the courthouse, wearing a wrinkled blazer and the same sunglasses she'd worn the first day she tried to claim my land. Seeing her in handcuffs didn't bring me joy the way I thought it would. It just felt necessary. I spent that morning mending a broken section of the north fence. The hammering rhythm steadied me, reminding me of what mattered: the land, the peace, the quiet rhythm of work that didn't need approval or applause. My phone buzzed again. Evelyn, of course. Guess who finally pleaded not guilty, she said. I smirked. Let me guess, she's claiming it's all a misunderstanding? Pretty much. She's saying the board approved the expenses and that you manipulated the boundary lines to frame her? I laughed. She's still trying to talk her way out. Figures. Don't worry, Evelyn said. The DA has your footage, the county audit, and testimony from 2 board members. She's toast. But they'd like you to testify? I paused, looking out at the horizon. If it'll shut this chapter for good, I'll do it. Court day came faster than I expected. I walked into the county courthouse wearing my best jacket, boots polished, papers in hand. The place smelled like pine cleaner and nerves. Samantha sat at the defense table, eyes sunken, hair tied back in a tight bun. The spark she once carried, that smug, unshakable confidence, was gone. When I took the stand, I told the story plain and simple. How she'd moved survey lines, how her workers trespassed, how she vandalized my fence in the dead of night, and how her greed had finally caught up to her. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't need to. The facts did the work. When Evelyn presented the security footage, Samantha's lawyer didn't even look up. The jury's faces said everything, disbelief turning to disgust. Afterward, I stepped outside into the sunlight, the courthouse doors swinging shut behind me. Reporters shouted questions, microphones flashed, but I didn't say a word. This wasn't my victory to gloat over. It was justice doing its job for once. A week later, Ridgeview voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. Turns out once people realized how badly they'd been milked for fees, they wanted nothing to do with homeowner politics ever again. The Ridgeview sign came down 2 days later, a little wooden arch that used to say, a community built on trust and values. Now, it was just an empty stretch of dirt road, leading nowhere. I watched them haul the sign away from my truck and couldn't help but feel something poetic about it, like the land itself was cleansing. The stain she left behind. About a month after the trial, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, no stamp, just tucked in my box like a ghost had dropped it off. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in neat cursive. You ruined my life, but maybe I deserved it. I don't know what I thought I was doing. Everything I built was a lie, and I see that now. Enjoy your land. I hope it brings you peace. S.I. folded the note carefully, not sure whether to feel anger, pity, or both. Then I set it in the fire and watched the edges curl into ash. Peace, I muttered. That's the one thing she never understood. With Ridgeview gone, the valley felt alive again. The air seemed cleaner, the birds louder, the nights quieter. Neighbors who'd once avoided me started stopping by, not with gossip, but with kindness. One older couple brought a pie. Another offered to help mend the south fence. It felt like the community had finally remembered what it meant to be a community. Still, part of me wanted to leave something behind, and a reminder, not out of spite, but as a warning for anyone else who thought they could steal land with ink and arrogance. So, one Saturday morning, I started a new project, right at the spot where Samantha's trail markers first appeared. I built a new gate, heavy oak, reinforced with iron. Above it, I hung a carved wooden sign that read, Walker Ranch, established 1948, private land, earned, not given. Below that, I added a small brass plaque. This fence was built to keep more than trespassers out. I didn't tell anyone what that meant. They could figure it out for themselves. Summer rolled in, and with it, the valley turned gold again. The cattle grazed peacefully, the air buzzed with cicadas, and the only sound at night was the soft hum of the wind through the wire. Every once in a while, I'd drive past Ridgeview's old entrance. The clubhouse was boarded up, weeds creeping over the sidewalks. It didn't look like a neighborhood anymore. It looked like a warning, and maybe that was how it should stay. An empty monument to what happens when greed meets its match. Months later, Evelyn called me one last time. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "The county finalized everything. Your deed's clean, Ridgeview's dissolved, and Samantha took a plea deal. 18 months probation, 5 years banned from any HOA work." I smiled faintly. "So she's grounded, basically," Evelyn laughed. "You won, Garrett, completely." I looked out across the pasture where the sunset painted everything orange and gold. "No," I said softly. "The land won. I just stood up for it. That night, I walked the fence line with my lantern, the same way I used to when Sarah was alive. The wire glimmered like silver threads in the moonlight. At the far end, I stopped, leaned on the top rail, and looked out across the dark field. "This is for you," I whispered, "and for everyone who thought I'd just roll over." The wind carried the words out into the night, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled back, a sound not of loneliness but of freedom. A full year passed after Ridgeview dissolved, and with it, the noise faded. The town went back to what it used to be. Slower, simpler, honest. People stopped talking about the feud. The gossip died down. Even Samantha's name became just a faint echo, like the sound of thunder that once rattled the valley but no longer reached the hills. Life found its rhythm again. Each morning I'd wake before sunrise, pour my coffee, and walk the fence line. The ground was firmer now, the grass growing thick along the posts. I'd run my hand along the cool steel, feel the grit of the earth under my boots, and think about how far it all had come. The land looked alive again, as if it had been holding its breath through every lie, every lawsuit, every fight. Some days I'd catch the neighbors walking along the dirt road, stopping just long enough to admire the new gate I'd built. A few even asked to take pictures of it. Said it reminded them that standing your ground doesn't always take anger, just patience and proof. I didn't mind. The sign wasn't for me anymore. It was for them. For anyone who'd ever been told they couldn't protect what was theirs. One afternoon, I got a letter from the county. At first, I thought it was another tax notice, but when I opened it, I found a certificate. Land Preservation Grant, awarded to Walker Ranch for heritage conservation. Turns out, Evelyn had filed the paperwork months ago without telling me. The land was now officially recognized as a protected rural property, meaning no one, not an HOA, not a developer, not anyone, could ever touch it again without my say. It felt like the final nail in the coffin, not for revenge, but for permanence. I stood out by the main gate that evening, watching the sun dip low across the fields. The sky looked like fire and honey, streaked with the last light of day. I thought about my grandfather, who built the first barn here with nothing but old tools and grit. About my father, who taught me that land doesn't belong to you, you belong to it. And about Sarah, who dreamed of planting wildflowers along the fence line. I finally did that in her memory. Sunflowers, lilacs, and mountain daisies, a whole ribbon of color running along the wire. When the wind blew, they swayed like a chorus, soft, gentle, alive. Sometimes at night, I'd still catch the faint sound of tires on the gravel road leading past Ridgeview's old site. The clubhouse was gone now, torn down after the bank reclaimed it. The lots sat empty, just overgrown grass, broken signs, and silence. But in the moonlight, that silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, like the valley had been waiting for this quiet all along. I heard through town that Samantha had moved 2 counties over, renting a small apartment near the city. Word was she was working as an assistant for some property management firm. Not a bad life, just a far cry from the self-proclaimed Queen of Ridgeview. Part of me hoped she'd learned something from it. Another part of me didn't care. I wasn't angry anymore. You can't stay angry forever. It eats you up from the inside. What mattered was that the land was whole again, and so was I. That fall, the county invited me to speak at a community forum, some new initiative about rural rights and property reform. At first, I laughed it off. I wasn't a speaker, I was a rancher. But Evelyn convinced me, so I went. When I walked onto that small stage in front of a few dozen farmers, landowners, and even a couple of local officials, I didn't bring notes. I just told them the truth. I told them how it started. A few flags in the dirt, a woman with too much power and not enough sense, and a man who refused to back down. I told them how easy it is for people to take what's yours if you stop paying attention. How paper can move faster than justice if you let it, and how one fence, one act of quiet defiance, can stop an entire machine in its tracks. When I finished, the room stayed quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Soon everyone joined in. It wasn't applause for me. It was for the idea that ordinary people still have power when they stand their ground. That winter, the valley froze under a blanket of white. The world slowed down again, the kind of stillness that makes you appreciate every creak of the house, every spark in the fireplace. One night as I sat by the window, I noticed the moonlight reflecting off the wire fence. Just a glint, like a silver thread running through the dark. I remembered what Sarah once told me years ago, back when we were young and still dreaming about the ranch. The land never forgets who stood up for it. Back then, I didn't understand. Now I did. It wasn't just soil and posts and grass. It was memory. Everything that came before and everything still to come, written in every blade of grass and every breath of wind that moved through the valley. In the spring, the flowers came back, brighter than ever. The air smelled like rain and earth and hope. Sometimes kids from the nearby town would come out to visit, asking if they could see the famous Fence of Ridgeview. The story had taken on a life of its own, half legend, half lesson. I always told them the same thing. This fence isn't about keeping people out. It's about reminding them what happens when someone tries to take what isn't theirs. They'd nod, wide-eyed, not fully understanding, but knowing it meant something important. And that was enough. On the first anniversary of the day I finished building the fence, I held a small gathering at the ranch, just a few friends, some neighbors, and Evelyn, who brought a bottle of wine she claimed was older than the HOA itself. We sat under the oak tree by the barn, the one my grandfather planted when he bought this land. We talked, laughed, and watched the sun disappear behind the mountains. When the stars came out, I stood and raised my glass. To fences, I said, to freedom, and to never letting anyone write your story for you. They clinked glasses, and for a moment it felt like everything had come full circle, from loss to fight to peace. Later that night, long after everyone left, I walked the fence one last time before heading in. The moon hung low, casting silver across the valley. I stopped by the gate, ran my hand over the carved letters, Walker Ranch, earned, not given. The metal was cold under my fingertips, but the feeling it gave me was warm, solid, real, unshakable. I looked out at the land that had taken so much and given back more than I ever expected, and as the night breeze whispered through the wild flowers, I finally smiled. Because I knew now. The fight had never really been about the fence. It was about belonging. It was about respect. It was about remembering that some things, the honest kind, can't be taken, only defended. And if the land remembers who stood up for it, then maybe, just maybe, it would remember me too.